Long losing streaks reveal the weakness in a team's foundation, but can Steve Kerr fix the real issues? The real issues. On today's Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is the good word, everyone? We appreciate you for making Locked On Warriors a part of your day. A lot of ways you can check us out. YouTube, we stream there live after all the games, almost all the games. And give us the thumbs up while you're there. Subscribe. You can also catch us on your favorite audio podcast platform. Just search the name Locked On Warriors on Google, and we are anywhere and everywhere. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers, you place $5 bet. You'll get started with 150 in bonus bets. If you win that $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We also have a newsletter, a daily newsletter that's free. It's delivered right to your inbox. You can check it out at lockedondaily.com to have that free newsletter delivered right to you. My name's Charlie Walter. Covered the Warriors for 95.7 The Game, also CBS News Bay Area, that's KPIX, for a few seasons. Matt Kolsky covered them for a few more seasons than me. He's seen a lot more losing streaks and a lot more winning streaks over the years. He spent some time at 95.7 The Game and KNBR as well. The premise of today's show revolves around a couple of obvious points right now for the Warriors. A, the 12-man rotation is no longer working, and it sounds like they're going to make some changes coming up soon. What will those changes be? And B, even if Steve Kerr pushes all the right buttons here, are we glossing over the real issue at hand? And that's the depth isn't good enough and the top isn't top heavy enough. What's up, man? Anything on your mind before we get into the meat and potatoes? I see you have the pink crown on for those of you watching on YouTube. You had a little birthday party, it seemed like. You told me today you had to record a little later than usual. You said I'm at a party. And then you sent the picture about 5 minutes later, and I said, oh, I thought, you were watching NFL Sunday football, and no.
Nope, I was at my niece's third birthday party, and I made myself this wonderful pink crown, bejeweled it myself, spent way too much time on it, took too many children's jewels, but I'm feeling good about it. I hope everybody likes it.
Anything to make the kids happy, man. So let's start with the rotation. 13 Warriors played in the first 14 minutes. Essentially, in a quarter, the Warriors went with 13 guys out there. If you have an issue with that, you should. You should have an issue with that because it's not conducive to players getting in rhythm. Even Steph Curry mentioned it. When asked if the rotation needed to be shortened directly after the game by Slater, he said, quote, "We need to be a little more predictable on our night-to-night rotations." So why is Moses Moody going for 15 minutes one game and 3 minutes the next? Why is Anderson going for 21 games, 7 the next? Why are you trying to push all the right buttons and be the smartest man in the room? Instead, trust your guys. Who are your guys on this team? I trust Curry, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney on a night-to-night basis, those four. Aside from that, I really don't know, but those are the four most important guys from your 2022 title team, which brings up the later argument that there's not enough horses in the barn, that the Warriors need more dogs. But let's start with Steve Kerr alluding to the fact that they do need to think about shortening the rotation. He says they've been looking carefully at combinations. How much tinkering do you envision?
Well, I mean, let's start with, I think the 12-plus man rotation was always intended to be a tinkering sort of thing. And I think what happened is at the beginning of the season, so many guys were playing so well and they were winning so convincingly that it was like, all right, I guess we'll go with this for a while. Historically, it's just not a thing, right? And look, I always say nothing has ever happened until it happens for the first time, right? So, I don't think it was a terrible idea to try, but it seems we have gotten to a point where it's hurting more than it's helping. The trick of it is, if you told me we got to get down to 9 or 10, playing every night, 7 to 10 gets really squirrely. It really, really does. I mean, look, putting aside my own Kuminga issues, right? You said the trustworthy four there, and I don't necessarily disagree. Steph, Draymond, Wiggs, and Loon. Loon is Loon, so you're still only talking about 15 minutes a night, right?
Yeah,
Like
but he's
that's
been
not
playing well. He
no
plays well, and you can trust his role.
100%. I am 100% in agreement on that. It's just that's only 15 minutes a night or so, right? So you basically got three guys at 25 plus, and I think Kuminga has to be in the next group, right? That gets you to about 5. Then Buddy is clearly part of a group, right? That's 6 guys. After that, if I got to pick 4 out of the rest, it's really hard. Do I want Lindy Waters or Moody or Pajemski? And part of the problem is that, by the way they've played this year, I probably rate those 3, Moody first, Lindy second, Pajemski third. But by the way the organization values Pajemski, it's hard to imagine him falling entirely out of the rotation, right? It sure seems a shame for Moses Moody to fall all the way out of the rotation. Does that mean Lindy Waters is the odd man out? Well, Steve Kerr has started him on a handful of occasions because he likes him so much. Same thing when you look at the slightly bigger options, right? I mean, Trace has been a starter. But you're right. I would certainly agree that Looney is more trustworthy, if that's the metric we're using, right? Trace has a higher ceiling. Looney's certainly more trustworthy at this stage. Kyle Anderson, where does he fall in that group? It's not an easy problem. And the obvious answer to all of this is some sort of consolidation trade. Now, I think when you had Melton, it was a little different, because putting him at the top of that guard rotation kind of makes the other pieces fit in a way I'm not sure they totally do now. And the obvious thing is to consolidate some of your good talent into less great talent. I'm just not sure if the actual opportunity to do that is really out there for them.
Pretty crazy because 3 months ago in July, we heard that report that came out, the Markkanen trade. It was Moody, it was Kuminga, it was Pods, and it was a couple first-round draft picks. At the time, we scoffed. I mean, going back, when you think about that trade with the way Moody, Kuminga, and Pods have been playing and have been handled and the trajectory of what their careers can be, I mean, yes, the first-round picks are what gets me to say I still probably wouldn't do that. But when you're talking about the 3 players in a straight-up swap, I mean, it is a no-brainer because that's kind of the move that the Warriors did need in the offseason. I don't know if Lowry was the right guy. I'm not saying
that's the thing, right?
I'm not saying it in that sense that Lowry was the player to bring in, but I'm saying that consolidating trade, it would have seemed like it would have been more valuable in the offseason when they hadn't been playing yet, because quite frankly, all 3 of those guys' stock is down from the offseason. I don't think that's debatable.
Pajemski's definitely down. I don't know that Moody's stock has changed much, and Kuminga's stock is one of the most fascinating.
Moody hasn't gone public yet, man. Moody hasn't even gone public yet. He doesn't have a stock out there. They haven't IPO'd. I mean, he wasn't the floor enough.
But he never has, right? So that's not new. I'm just saying I don't know that it's changed much.
It's changed because now you have 13 million attached to him for years to come. So if you're putting
that's so small. That's less than Melton's making, that's a pretty good deal. I don't think Moody's that relevant, to be honest. At this point, Moody is salary filler in a trade if he's part of a trade. Because like you said, salary filler with some potential. I love Moses Moody, but like you said, he has not been on the floor enough to make him a legitimate, desirable asset in a trade like that. Kuminga is the interesting. Pods has definitely gone down, no question. So I don't think trading him makes any sense at this point. Kuminga's the interesting one because certainly you're right that nothing on the floor has raised his stock. I don't know that it's really lowered it, but the interesting question is just how do people around the league view him? Because I think you can see even within the Warriors organization, there's a pretty wide disparity on how Jonathan Kuminga is viewed. Certainly among the fan base, he is viewed as everything from a total bust to the player of the future, and everything in between, right? So what does the league see in Jonathan Kuminga is a fascinating question. And I guess the bigger issue is, like you said, the consolidation of the market and trade made sense. Was he the right guy at that price? Maybe not. And also, I don't think Ainge was ever going to trade him. But again, we could say the same thing about Paul George. Conceptually, it made sense, right? Wiggins, Kuminga, and picks for Paul George. That makes sense conceptually. Consolidation, a more established star player. But was Paul George the guy you wanted? Not really. Like I think they would have done it if the Clippers had done it. But Paul George has barely played this season. And who knows if that would be different if he was a Warrior. There's no reason to think it would be, because not being on the floor has been his biggest problem. It's just really tough. Jimmy Butler has been mentioned. Certainly Giannis will continue to be mentioned, but that's a non-starter until he decides he's done in Milwaukee, and they're winning now. I don't know who the guy is. And look, we'll keep our eyes out, but the names that are on the market, Brandon Ingram, Jimmy Butler is the most appealing to me, and I don't know how realistic that is, and I don't know how much that raises your ceiling if you, for instance, gave up Wiggins and Kuminga and a first-round pick for Jimmy Butler. Are you better? Are you a lot better? I don't know.
So the storyline of the offseason has kind of come back into play here, and that is
You need to be more like a dog. You need to be more like a dog.
we need more dogs. The Warriors need more dogs. Let's continue the conversation on how they could get those dogs internally or externally. That's coming up on Locked On Warriors. It's that time of the year where we really dive into the Christmas spirit. The stockings are out. The Christmas tree has started to get some lights on in the Walter household. Kylan's already complaining that the tree is too small. The ceilings are 9 feet. She thinks it's a tree. It's only 6'5". We're struggling right now, but we give thanks this time of the year. It's just a cozy time of the year. Even if you're in the warm parts of the Bay Area, it's just there's something that makes you warm and fuzzy, about some hot chocolate in the month of December. Therapy is also a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire, you'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, so the Warriors, man, they need some more dogs on the team. We thought that maybe they had pushed all the right pieces in the offseason. Mike Dunleavy went out and got the perfect core. Not even a nucleus, just the perfect bench rotational players that would all mesh together and somehow make this thing work in a league that has not seen 11, 12-man rotations work. And with D'Anthony Melton, it seemed to be working, but they lose 4 straight games due to the Warriors, and now it has definitely revealed a weakness in the team's foundation, and that is that the top isn't top-heavy enough, and the bench, the depth, it's not good enough depth, at least consistently. You get games where Buddy can go off for 6 threes. You get games where Kuminga can score 25. You get games where Moody will light it up for 15 points to end a quarter, whatever it may be. But there's just no consistency to it. The rotations have been interesting, to say the least. When the Warriors started off the season 12-3, their bench was averaging 54 a game. Over the course of their 4-game losing streak, they've averaged 40 points per game. Now, I've seen on the comments of our show that people think that it's as simple as playing Moody. Quite frankly, I want to see Moody Kuminga just get 35 minutes of run the next 2 games. I want to see Pods and GP2 get 0, just so I can hear everyone be quiet, just to prove a point. If it works, it works. And I know that's not the way they're thinking, but it's been an aggravating storyline to the season. Bottom of the bench players, hey, if you reshuffle a few things, the Warriors are all of a sudden going to be title contenders and they're not going to be losing these games. Could it be true? I mean, there is some truth to it on a game-to-game basis, but I think overall the point that we're all overlooking is the fact that the Warriors have kind of mentioned, even in the offseason internally, that they were not good enough to win a championship. They were going to find ways to do so. And the only thing they've done during the season is lose their starting shooting guard.
I mean, that's the real. There's two parts, right? The top heavy thing has been an issue really since 2019. Since Klay's first injury, right? The Warriors have not had a legitimate second star. And that includes a title win. So, but as great as Wiggins was, as incredible as Draymond is in his own way, there is a second star thing. They had three of them when KD was here and Klay was Klay. And then after KD left and Klay was hurt and never quite the same, they had one, and it's Steph Curry. That we knew. The depth, I actually think it was enough with Melton. But losing your starting two guard is a dramatic blow to your depth. And it was never so, it seemed overwhelming, the depth. Because when they had everyone, they could keep throwing guys at you. And everyone was coming in full of energy, and they were playing balls to the wall, and it was working. It was always on a razor's edge. And I think that's what the Melton injury really showed us, is that it's that simple. The depth was good enough if everybody was there, but if you lost one of the top 5 or 6 guys, it was always going to be a problem. And it's probably unrealistic to expect all of those guys to be healthy and available all year long, and now Melton is gone. So the question becomes, until a potential trade materializes, what's the best approach?
And December 15th is that important date that we point to.
It's an important date anyway, because a lot of contracts become tradable then. Yeah. So, and then you've got a couple months to figure something out. And there's always a next disgruntled player in the NBA, right? Now, who is that going to be? Are they going to be a fit? Is there going to be a package the team wants? We'll see about all that. But there's always somebody who's ready to move on in the next couple months that we.
I'm going to stop you right there real quick, because do you think teams, with the way the Warriors have just owned the league over previous years, would be hesitant to make a deal to help out the Warriors? Or do you think that's more so a fan's perspective looking at it?
Yeah, I think it happens, but it's more of a fans thing. Ultimately, teams are going to do what they can do that they think is to their best advantage. And the Warriors draft picks post Steph Curry are still very appealing assets, right? If you jump beyond Steph Curry's contract extension, those Warrior first rounders, people expect to be pretty high picks. So I think they have values. Jonathan Kuminga is still an exciting talent. Whatever you think about what's happened on the floor, there are people who believe he has value around the league. How many? Are they the right people? I'm not sure about that. But he certainly has some value, right? Andrew Wiggins, playing the way he does, has some value for some teams, especially because his contract, while a ridiculous amount of money in the real world, is kind of becoming a mid-level deal for the NBA, and he seems appealing at mid-level money. So
I just don't know why you'd package him. He's been playing well. He fits.
If you had to get somebody really good is why you'd package him, right? I mean, because he is the big contract that you would trade. You're not going to be able to trade Draymond or Steph. So that's why. I mean, these are the sorts of decisions that are going to be staring the Warriors in the face if they really want to make a deal for a big name. And part of it, too, is just like any of those dudes, they're going to have a big contract you got to match, and they're going to have minutes and points and rebounds that they are requiring for their current team that current team is going to want to replace at some level. So you got to give up something to get something. And that's part of the point here is the Warriors can give up a few things, but in any trade for a star, you're going to have to give up something that hurts at least a little, right? So, that remains to be seen. In the meantime, I just think you got to play Kuminga and Moody. You got to. Because you have to figure out as best you can what they are capable of offering you if you can't or don't want to trade them. And if you do want to trade them, you got to put on display a little bit what they can do for someone else. I don't see any route where less, especially of Kuminga, but also of Moody, helps in any way. Like the players you're going to play ahead of them are not so good that, you know, you're gaining a huge advantage. They're just not. There are not that many guys that are that good on this team. And look, maybe they surprise you. Certainly Moody and Kuminga have both surprised this coaching staff in the past because, you know, coming off of nothing, they've gotten opportunities and been good at times, right? So we can complain about the mistakes they make, and they're both young players who make mistakes. But the marginal advantage you might get from playing a less mistake-prone player that's, you know, whether that's Lindy Waters or Kyle Anderson or whoever, that marginal edge is not worth the cost of A, development of young players, and B, figuring out what the hell you have. The Warriors still, I don't think, fundamentally know what they have in those guys. They're both.
I think they do, though, man. I think the playing time says it all. Unless Moody's got something going on with his knee or whatnot, if you're playing 3 minutes, it tells you all that you need to know, especially after getting a contract extension in the offseason. Like, it just goes to show that.
Tell me what that means.
What do you mean by that?
When you say it tells you all you need to know, what does it tell you? That Moody is playing 15 minutes some nights and 3 another?
It tells me that Moses Moody, in terms of the way that he keeps men in front of him and the way that he is able to move the ball in offense and just the way that he's able to play make, aren't good enough. And Steve Kerr thinks that whoever is playing over him at the given time gives him a better chance to win. Otherwise, it makes no logical sense for you to play a Gary Payton over a Moses Moody. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean, one player is 3 years of the future, the other's on an expiring deal.
But it tells you that Steve Kerr would rather play Gary Payton. We just don't know.
So I guess that's where the argument that we run into, man, because there are so many people out there that legitimately think that Steve Kerr doesn't know what he's looking at, that he just plays his favorites, and that he would rather play his favorites over winning. Well, to me, it seems like the most wild thing in the world. And I think the only way to prove it is our science experiment, where you just play Kuminga, Moody 35 minutes for the next 2 games, and you see what happens.
Well, I don't think anyone's actually advocating for that, but giving Moody
25,
giving Moody a minimum of 20 for a week or 2 would be worthwhile, I think. And are we forgetting literally less than a year ago, Jonathan Kuminga getting benched, throwing a fit, and then finally getting a consistent run of minutes and becoming a 20-point per game scorer? Like, I don't think you have to think Steve Kerr's an idiot to think that he has a blind spot in these 2 draft picks. Because I think we've seen evidence of it, like I just said, with Kuminga, and maybe more to the point.
So why hasn't Mike stepped in?
I don't think that's how this organization runs itself. And by the way, I want to make it absolutely clear that I don't think Steve Kerr is an idiot or he doesn't know what he's looking at. I think he is valuing different things. And I think sometimes Steve Kerr's way of valuing what he wants on the floor on a given night is typical for a head coach, but is unfortunately short-term thinking. Because on any given night, if we go back to what we started this podcast with, right? The idea of who do you trust on this team? Undeniably, although he's not in the list we made because he's not relevant enough, Steve Kerr trusts Gary Payton II. He is the first sub off the bench every night. I think it is also obvious that Gary Payton's ability does not support being the 6th man of a top half Western Conference basketball team. And I mean top 8, not top 4, right? Gary Payton, I love him. He brings certain things to the floor. He's an excellent role player, but he is not good enough to be the 6th man of a Western Conference playoff team. They have better players. Flat out, Jonathan Kuminga is a better basketball player overall than Gary Payton. But Gary Payton is going to be where he needs to be. Gary Payton is going to do exactly what is asked of him. And Gary Payton is going to make very few mistakes. And Steve Kerr, And look, as a guy who's been competing for titles, you understand having your role players be solid is very important when you have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant and Draymond Green in their prime. Now, when you have Steph somehow still in his prime, but really no other firepower at the top of this team, I would argue it's more important to have the upside of a Moody or a Kuminga or even a Pods at times out there as opposed to the solidness of Gary Payton II. And Steve Kerr has not adjusted his value system in that way. And I think that is like a more reasonable explanation of a lot of the things the fans are feeling when they're shouting that Steve Kerr doesn't know what he's doing. I think in a quiet moment, most people who watch basketball understand that Steve Kerr is an elite head coach, but it is possible to believe someone's an elite head coach and also believe they're making mistakes.
It's a very eloquent way to put it from Matt Kolsky on today's show. We'll talk about how the Warriors can get better and the teams that they'll be facing as they try to get back on the beaten path, because it's been, I guess, beaten a lot lately in terms of defeats, unfortunately. So the path continues. We'll talk who the Warriors are playing. That is coming up on Locked On Dubs. Our friends over at FanDuel, get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch, you know what's coming. The next play, you got the live play-by-play. You got the latest stats, and you've got the bets. You got them all in one page. Consolidation. FanDuel.com. Visit and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win that $5 bet, it's on FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The Warriors' win total before the season was 43.5. They currently sit with a pretty good chance at hitting that record at this point. They're 12-7, but the number keeps going down every day, man. But if you want to make that live bet on how many they can win, you can do it on FanDuel.com. Names that have been brought up in recent days. I saw, who was it? Vucevic from the Chicago Bulls got brought up, averaging 20 and 9 this season. Kolsky, for those on YouTube, can see it. For those on audio, he's saying no go. Another name that got brought up from the chat. I actually haven't heard any real ties to it, but would the Raptors sell? And if they were looking to sell, Jakob Poeltl.
Who are you trading for Jakob Poeltl, just out of curiosity?
It's a very good question.
I'm not sure that's a consolidation trade. And I'm not sure. I just don't know that there's a scenario where Jakob Poeltl makes you a contender. Man, he is scoring.
He's having a good year, man.
Yeah. He's 16-12, which is pretty damn good. Okay. So let's just imagine if it is the Raptors, right? They're certainly only looking for young talent. Boy, their team is built around Scotty Barnes,
Air Canada,
and Grady Dick has actually been weirdly excellent this year. Would Kuminga be interesting to them? Maybe play him at the 4 and Barnes at like the 0.3. Dick is your 2. Sort of a 2-3-4 of the future could be interesting. Would you trade Jonathan Kuminga for Jakob Poeltl? So it would probably, let's call it Kuminga, Melton's contract, and Gary Payton. I don't know, man. I don't think Jakob Poeltl makes you
it becomes them looking at the mirror. And by them, I mean the front office, and saying, are we going to pay Jonathan Kuminga? Are we going to match his rights in the offseason when someone comes in with an offer? What's our plans for his future? Obviously, there can be in-season development. It happens from time to time. But if this mix-up that Steve Kerr is alluding to, we need to shorten the rotation. If that does not involve Kuminga getting more minutes and involves him staying the same or getting less, then you have to start talking about, sending him elsewhere and bringing in an asset that you think is going to fit your style. Or the only other option is you find yourself a new head coach.
And I think that would be insane. So I don't think there's any chance of Steve Kerr being fired by the Golden State Warriors, to be perfectly clear. I think there's a better chance of him saying that I've had enough at some point in the next few years than the Warriors saying that. I think you're right, though. They've got to get on the same page about there's got to be a plan of what they want out of Jonathan Kuminga. Because if what they want is for him to establish himself as a, forever Warrior, they're not giving him the opportunity to do so in a realistic way. If what they want is to use him in a trade for a star player, I would argue they're not doing the best job of making him appear to be a valuable asset.
No, what they're doing is treating him like an up-and-coming role player that's getting, typical minutes for someone his age. The difference is he's a lottery pick.
Yeah, they're treating it. That's a very good description. And you're right that if sort of having his minutes jerked back and forth and being pulled off the court when he misses a defensive rotation and all that stuff is the way you are committing to handling this kid, then you might as well move him for the first opportunity that arises, because otherwise, what are you doing? I don't know. Pirtle's an interesting name in terms of a position of need. He'd be the tallest guy on the roster, right? If you don't count Quentin Post. And he is a legitimate scoring and rebounding option. I don't think he would make you a championship contender. I don't think he fits the bill of, making the roster more top heavy, but he's a known quantity in a position of need. So again, if Jonathan Kuminga is not something you are interested in, maybe that is the sort of trade you'd be looking at. I think it's pretty underwhelming to trade, a top 10 pick who has had the moments of brightness that Kuminga has had for someone like a Jakob Poeltl. But you're right that at some point the approach has to make sense, right? So you either approach it in a way that could work or you move on.
Yeah, and that's why I look at it. What's the Warriors' plan moving forward? What's your plan? Are you going to play him the 30 minutes like the fans have been clamoring for the longest time? Are you going to give him the opportunity to kind of, hey, here's your 2-week trial, Jonathan. Entering the new year, we're going to give you the month of December to show that you are a forever Warrior, and
last time they did
really
that,
the only way you can do this thing, because at some point, if you want to be a serious contender this year, you're going to have to look into exploring other options. And the best way to find out which options make the most sense are to tirelessly work with the ones that you currently have instead of experimenting so much to where you don't even know what you currently have December 1st.
Yeah, and we know Gary Payton II's ceiling, God love Lindy Waters. We may not know his exact ceiling, but I think we have an idea. Nobody knows Jonathan Kuminga's ceiling right now. And that to me is why I've always thought he needs to be more of a central focus of what's happening until you have a better idea of what that ceiling is. And maybe I'm higher on Moses Moody than most, but I also think his ceiling is somewhat unknown. He has surprised me with some of his athleticism this year. He has surprised me with some of his passing ability this year. And I just think it's really hard for somebody at 22 years old to be super confident about playing well in their role when they've never had an established role. I just think that's a lot to ask.
The conversation continues. Warriors continue this gauntlet. Who's up next for Golden State? You got the schedule in front of you. I just said it last night, and I'm already forgetting.
It's a great question and a wild presumption by you to
it's
suggest.
Denver.
There you
it's
go.
Denver.
That I have the schedule in front of me. If a game is not tomorrow, I don't know
it's
what's
the Denver
happening.
Nuggets on December
Tuesday.
3rd. That's a show. That's how we round it out with correct information. I remembered last second. So Denver Nuggets. We'll talk to you before then. For Matt Kolsky, Charlie Walter, this is Locked On Warriors. Subscribe on your way out the door, and we appreciate you for making it a part of your day. Peace.